The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal spires of Kelrose when the first Dominion ships appeared in the sky. Elder Visas felt the tremor through his crystalline body as the harmonic frequencies of his people shifted from peaceful morning songs to confused whispers of fear. The Villani had never seen warships before. Their entire civilization was built on harmony and music. They communicated through beautiful crystal songs that rang across their cities like living symphonies. War was a concept they had only heard about in stories from other worlds. Stories they had always believed were just dark fantasies. But the black ships descending from the clouds were very real. Captain Hyan Wu was 3 sectors away when his communication officer picked up the first transmission. He was drinking his morning coffee on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the stars through the viewport and thinking about his daughter back on Earth. The signal came through as a burst of pure sound that made every human on the bridge stop what they were doing. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing they had ever heard. The Villani distress call was not words or data. It was pure emotion translated into music. Fear, desperation, the sound of an entire species crying out for help. The communication system struggled to translate it into human language, but the meaning was clear even without words. We are dying. Our world burning. If any compassionate species receives this, please remember that we existed. Hyan Wu set down his coffee cup and stared at the communication console. His hands were shaking slightly. In 20 years of military service, he had never heard anything like this. The sound seemed to reach into his chest and squeeze his heart. Back on Kelrose, the Dominion forces were landing. The Villani watched in horror as massive machines rolled off the transport ships. These were not exploration vehicles or diplomatic vessels. These were instruments of war designed for one purpose: complete destruction. The Dominion soldiers were tall, gray-skinned beings with no visible emotions. They moved with mechanical precision as they set up their equipment. The Villani tried to communicate with them, sending out harmonic greeting songs that had worked with every other species they had ever met. The Dominion soldiers responded by firing their weapons into the crystal spires. The sound that rose from the Villani when their buildings began to shatter was unlike anything in the galaxy. It was the sound of a peaceful species experiencing violence for the first time. Elder Visas felt each destroyed crystal like a physical blow. These were not just buildings. They were part of their collective memory, their history, their very souls. But worse was coming. Admiral Young was in the middle of a strategy meeting when the emergency alert came through. The Galactic Union had intercepted the Villani distress signal and was debating what to do about it. The meeting room fell silent as the translation played through the speakers. Most of the alien representatives looked uncomfortable. The Horthok delegate made clicking sounds that translated as sympathy, but no action could be taken. The Dominion was too powerful. The Villani were too far away. It was unfortunate, but these things happened in the galaxy. Young listened to their excuses and felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had heard these same words before. When the Rwandan genocide happened, the international community said it was too complicated to intervene. When the Bosnian massacres occurred, they said it was not their responsibility. When the Uyghur camps were exposed, they said economic considerations had to be balanced against human rights. Humanity had heard all these excuses before. They had been on both sides of them. The Galactic Union meeting ended with no decision to act. The representatives filed out, shaking their heads sadly about the unfortunate situation. Young remained in her chair, staring at the tactical display showing the location of Kelrose. It was impossibly far away. Any rescue mission would take months to reach them. By then, the Villani would likely be extinct. Her aide, Lieutenant Taman, approached carefully. He had served with Young for 5 years and knew that look on her face. It was the same expression she had worn when they first learned about the slave markets on Kepler 442. The same look she had when they discovered the Zephyrian death camps. Admiral Taman said quietly, "The Galactic Union has made their position clear. We cannot act without their approval." Young turned to look at him. Her eyes were hard as steel. "The Galactic Union can go to hell, Lieutenant. Get me fleet command. We're going to war." On Kelrose, the systematic destruction continued. The Dominion had brought specialized equipment designed to break down the crystalline structures that the Villani used for everything. Their homes, their art, their very bodies were all made of the same living crystal that sang with harmonic frequencies. The Dominion soldiers seemed to take particular pleasure in watching the crystals dissolve. They had brought acid sprayers that turned the beautiful singing stones into puddles of silent sludge. Every dissolved crystal made the Vellani song weaker, sadder, more desperate. Elder Desus gathered the surviving members of his council in the deepest chamber of the great Crystal Palace. The walls here were thick and old, formed over thousands of years of accumulated song. But even here, they could feel the vibrations of destruction above them. "We must send a long song, Elder D," said his harmonic voice, carrying notes of determination mixed with sorrow. "We must let the galaxy know what happened here." The other elders looked at him with shock. The long song was their most sacred ritual, only used when the entire species faced extinction. It would broadcast their collective memory, their history, their souls into space as a final testament to their existence. "But, Elder," said one of the younger council members, "if we sing the long song, we will not have the strength to defend ourselves." Desus looked around at his people. Many were already showing signs of crystal deterioration from the stress and trauma. The young ones had stopped singing entirely, their voices locked in silent terror. The old ones were beginning to crack, their ancient crystal bodies unable to cope with the horror they were witnessing. "My children," he said softly, "we were never able to defend ourselves. We are not warriors, we are singers. So let us sing one last song that the entire galaxy will hear. Let them know that we chose to use our final breath not for curses or hatred, but to remind the universe that beauty once existed here." The decision was made. The Vellani began to sing their death song, pouring all their remaining life force into a transmission that would carry their story across the stars. It was beautiful and heartbreaking and desperate all at once. And in a small human ship 3 sectors away, Captain Hyenwu heard it and made a choice that would change the galaxy. Forever, he opened a communication channel to Earth and spoke for words that would launch 1,000 ships. "Admiral, we have a problem." The emergency meeting in the Terran Defense Command lasted 14 hours. Admiral Soyoung stood at the head of the table, surrounded by the most powerful military leaders in human space. The holographic display showed the location of Kel, a tiny dot impossibly far from Earth. General Jae-Hyun leaned back in his chair, studying the tactical data. He was known throughout the fleet as the best strategic mind humanity had ever produced. His plans had saved Earth during the Centauri conflict and liberated the mining colonies from the hegemony pirates. But this was different. This was bigger than anything they had ever attempted. "The distance alone makes this nearly impossible," Jae-Hyun said, his voice calm despite the weight of his words. "We would need to travel through 17 different star systems. Half of them are controlled by species that barely tolerate our presence. The other half are completely unknown." Colonel Dongman, commander of the 1st Marine Division, stood up and walked to the display. He was a big man with scars on his hands from a dozen battles. His Marines called him the Iron Bear, and he had never backed down from a fight in his life. "How many Vellani are left?" he asked. So Dash Young touched the control, and the display changed to show the latest intelligence reports. The numbers were horrifying. In just 3 days, the Dominion had wiped out 60% of the Vellani population. The crystal cities were being dissolved one by one. "Approximately 2 million. She replied. "Maybe less by now." Dongmin nodded grimly. "Then we better move fast." The debate continued through the night. Some argued that the mission was suicide. Others said humanity could not afford to make enemies of the Dominion Collective. A few suggested that the Galactic Union might impose sanctions on Earth if they acted without permission. But as the sun rose over the command center, Admiral Soyoung made the decision that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. "We go," she said simply. "We go because it is right. We go because we are the only ones who will. And we go because someday we might need someone to come for us." The order went out across human space within hours. Every available ship was to report to Staging Point Omega, a remote asteroid base near the edge of the solar system. The message was simple. Humanity was going to war. Captain Hyenwu received his orders while still en route to Earth. The retribution was to serve as the advanced scout for the fleet. He gathered his crew in the main briefing room and told them what they would be facing. We are going to cross half the galaxy to fight an enemy we have never seen, to save people we have never met, he said. Anyone who wants to transfer to a different ship can do so now. No questions asked, no judgment. Not a single crew member moved. Lieutenant Minha, the ship's communication officer, raised her hand. She was young, barely out of the academy, but she had been the one to first receive the Volani signal. The sound of their dying song still haunted her dreams. Sir, she said, what if we are too late? What if they are all dead by the time we get there? Hyenwu looked at her with sad eyes. Then we make sure the Dominion pays for what they did. And we make sure the galaxy knows that humanity does not forget. The fleet assembly was unlike anything in human history. Ships came from every corner of human space. The massive battleships that guarded Earth's orbital stations. The fast destroyers that patrolled the outer colonies. The heavy cruisers that escorted the trade convoys. Even the old frigates from the first interstellar wars were pulled out of mothballs and refitted for combat. Chief Engineer Tejo worked around the clock at the Mars shipyards, preparing weapons that had been banned by the Galactic Union. Humanities had signed the Warfare Limitation Treaty, but they had never ratified it. Technically, they were free to use any weapons they wanted. The planet crackers are ready, Tejo reported to Admiral So-Young during a secure communication. But Admiral, these weapons are designed to destroy entire worlds. Are you sure we want to bring them? So-Young thought about the reports coming from The Dominion was not just killing the Volani, they were torturing them, dissolving their crystal bodies slowly while they were still alive, making them watch as their children were murdered in front of them. Bring everything, she said. If we are going to be the monsters, we might as well be the most effective monsters possible. The media called it the Mercy Fleet, but the soldiers had a different name for it. They called it the Reckoning Fleet. 300 ships carrying the finest weapons humanity had ever created, all heading toward a single objective: save the Volani and punish those who had harmed them. Colonel Dongman stood on the observation deck of the assault carrier Seoul, watching the fleet formation take shape. His Marines were preparing for the largest military operation in human history. 10,000 of the best soldiers humanity had ever produced, all volunteers who had asked to be part of the mission. His second-in-command, Major Hyojin, joined him at the viewing port. She was a small woman, but her reputation was legendary. She had led the assault on the hegemony fortress at Vega Prime and had personally captured 3 enemy generals. The men are ready, she reported. But Colonel, I have to ask, are we really going to war with the Dominion Collective over aliens we have never met? Dongmin turned to look at her. In the starlight, his scarred face looked older than his years. Hyojin, do you know why they call us Deathworlders? She nodded. Because Earth is a dangerous planet. High gravity, violent weather, deadly animals. Most species think we are crazy for evolving on such a hostile world. That is part of it, Dongman agreed. But there is more. We are Deathworlders because we learned something that the other species never had to learn. We learned that sometimes the only way to stop evil is to be more dangerous than the evil itself. He pointed out at the fleet, hundreds of ships moving in perfect formation through the darkness of space. Every one of those ships carries people who chose to risk their lives for strangers. Every Marine on this mission volunteered to fight a war they might not survive, for people they will never meet, because it was the right thing to do. Hyojin followed his gaze, watching the magnificent and terrible sight of humanity preparing for war. And you think that makes us the good guys? Dongman smiled grimly. No, Major, I think that makes us human. And sometimes that is all the galaxy needs. The final ship reported ready 6 days later. Admiral So-Young stood on the bridge of her flagship, the massive dreadnought Indomitable, and looked out at the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. In a few hours, they would begin the long journey to Kelros. Many of them would not return, but they would go anyway. Because that was what humans did. They stood up for those who could not stand up for themselves. They fought battles that could not be won. They crossed impossible distances to keep impossible promises. The Dominion Collective was about to learn why the galaxy feared the Deathworlders and The Vellani were about to learn that their desperate song had been heard by the one species in the galaxy that would answer with thunder. The jump to hyperspace felt different this time. Captain Hyan Wu stood on the bridge of the Retribution as the stars stretched into lines of light around them. Behind them, 300 human warships made the same jump, disappearing from normal space in flashes of blue energy. They were now committed to a journey that would take them across half the galaxy. The first week passed quietly. The fleet maintained radio silence to avoid detection, communicating only through encrypted laser bursts. But on the 8th day, Lieutenant Minha picked up something that made her hands shake as she worked the controls. "Captain," she called out, her voice tight with emotion. "I am receiving another transmission from Kelrose." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. If the Vellani were still broadcasting, some of them were still alive. But the signal was much weaker than before, and filled with static that spoke of dying transmitters and failing power sources. Hyan Wu walked over to the communication station, put it through the speakers. The sound that filled the bridge was heartbreaking. Where the first Vellani transmission had been pure and beautiful, despite its desperation, this one was broken and fragmented. It was the sound of a dying species singing its last song. Through the universal translator, fragments of meaning came through. Names of the dead, locations of destroyed cities, and underneath it all, a message that made every human on the ship feel cold inside. They are making it hurt. They are making it hurt on purpose. Dr. Sung Ho was in his laboratory when the transmission came through the ship's internal speakers. He was humanity's foremost expert on alien biology, but he had never studied the Vellani before. Now he was racing to understand their physiology, their culture, their weaknesses and strengths. What he was learning made him sick. The Vellani experienced pain differently from humans. Their crystalline bodies were incredibly sensitive to physical trauma, but they also felt emotional pain as actual physical sensations. When one Vellani died, the others could feel it through their harmonic connections. The Dominion had discovered this and was using it as a weapon. Sung Ho called Admiral Sawyer. "On the secure channel, Admiral, I have completed my analysis of the Vellani physiology. What the Dominion is doing to them is beyond cruel. They are not just committing genocide, they are torturing an entire species to death." So Young's voice came back cold and steady. "Explain." The Vellani share a collective consciousness through their crystal structure. When the Dominion dissolves one of them in acid, every other Vellani in the area feels that death is physical agony. They are being forced to experience the death of their entire species, one murder at a time. The communication channel was quiet for a long moment. Then So Young spoke again, and her voice carried a promise that made Sung Ho glad he was on the same side as her. "Doctor, I want you to prepare a full briefing for the fleet commanders. Every captain, every Marine officer, every pilot needs to understand exactly what we are dealing with. Because when we reach Kelrose, the Dominion is going to learn what happens when you make humans angry." 3 weeks into the journey, they encountered their first Dominion patrol. The alien ships were sleek and black, designed for intimidation. As much as combat, they moved in perfect formation. 12 vessels arranged in a pattern that spoke of military precision and absolute confidence. The lead Dominion ship opened communication channels and broadcast a message in the standard Galactic trade language. The translation came through clearly on every human ship in the fleet. "Unknown vessels, you are entering Dominion space. Identify yourselves and state your business or be destroyed." Admiral So Young was on the bridge of the Indomitable Wind. The message came through. She looked around at her officers, all of them waiting for her decision. Behind them, the entire human fleet hung in space like a pack of wolves watching their prey. "Open a channel," she ordered. The communication officer nodded. "Channel open, Admiral." So Young stepped forward, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had fought in a dozen wars and won them all. "This is Admiral So Young of the Terran Defense Fleet. We are responding to a distress call from Kelrose. You will withdraw immediately and allow us to pass." The response came back almost instantly, filled with the arrogance of a species that had never known defeat. "Humans, we know of your species. You are primitive warriors from a backwater system. You have no authority in Dominion space. Surrender now, and we will allow you to return to your pathetic little planet." On the bridge of the Retribution, Captain High Wu smiled coldly. He had been waiting for this moment since they left Earth. He opened a channel to his weapons officer. Mr. Park, you are authorized to fire. The first shot came from the Retribution's main cannon. It was a kinetic round moving at a significant fraction of the speed of light. The Dominion ship had shields, but they were designed to stop energy weapons and conventional explosives. They were not designed to stop a chunk of depleted uranium moving fast enough to punch through a small moon. The round hit the Dominion ship's bridge and kept going, emerging from the other side in a spray of metal and atmosphere. The alien vessel spun out of control, its crew dead before they knew what hit them. The other Dominion ships opened fire immediately, but they were already doomed. The human fleet moved like a pack of predators, each ship covering the others as they closed in. For the kill, the aliens fought with the discipline of a professional military, but they were facing something they had never encountered before. They were facing humans who were fighting for someone else. The battle lasted 17 minutes when it was over. 12 Dominion ships were drifting, hulks, their crews dead or dying. The human fleet had taken minor damage to 3 vessels and suffered no casualties. Admiral Soyoung stood on her bridge, looking out at the wreckage of the enemy patrol. Her communication officer was trying to raise the surviving Dominion ships, but there was no response. The aliens were either dead or pretending to be. Ma'am, the officer reported, we are receiving a transmission from the Dominion Fleet Command. They are demanding to know what happened to their patrol. Soyoung thought about the reports from Kelrose, the torture chambers, the systematic murder of innocent beings, the decision to make their deaths as painful as possible. Tell them, she said quietly, that they just met some humans who really do not like bullies. The message went out across Dominion space, carried by the surviving ships that had witnessed the battle. The translation was simple and clear, broadcast on every frequency the Dominion used. This is Admiral Soyoung of the human fleet. We are coming to kill. Any Dominion forces found harming the Villani will be destroyed without mercy. This is your only warning. The response came back within hours. The Dominion High Command was mobilizing every available ship to defend Kelrose, they were calling it, the greatest threat to their empire in 1,000 years. They had no idea how right they were. 2 months later, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kelrose system. What they saw there made even the most hardened veterans feel sick. The beautiful blue world was covered in black smoke. The crystal cities that had once sung with harmonic beauty were now smoking ruins, and in orbit around the planet, the largest military fleet in Dominion history waited for them. 500 ships, battle stations that could crack planets, weapons that could sterilize entire star systems against 300 human vessels that had traveled across the galaxy to keep a promise to strangers. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Soyoung looked out at the enemy fleet and smiled. It was not a nice smile. All ships, she broadcast to the human fleet. This is Admiral Soyoung. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you hurt innocent people in front of humans. Today we show them why they call us Deathworlders. The final battle for Kelrose was about to begin. The Battle of Kelrose began at 0600 Standard Time when the Dominion fleet opened fire with everything they had. 500 alien warships unleashed a barrage that lit up space like a new star being born. Energy beams, plasma missiles, and gravity bombs filled the void between the two fleets. Admiral Soyoung stood calmly on the bridge of the Indomitable as enemy fire crashed against their shields. Around her, the bridge crew worked with the precision of a machine, calling out damage reports and target acquisitions. The ship shuddered under the impact of Dominion weapons, but it held together. All ships, execute Pattern 7. Soyoung commanded into her communicator. Pattern 7 was something the Galactic Union had never seen before. Instead of forming battle lines like civilized species, the human fleet scattered like a pack of wolves attacking a herd. Each ship moved independently, using speed and unpredictability to confuse the enemy targeting systems. The Dominion Admiral, Korthak the Destroyer, watched from his flagship as the human formation broke apart. His tactical officer was confused, reporting that the enemy had lost all military discipline. Korthak smiled with satisfaction. These primitive humans were panicking already. He was wrong. Captain Hyanwu brought the retribution in low and fast. Skimming just above the atmosphere of Kelrose behind him, 6 other human destroyers followed in perfect formation. The Dominion ships tried to track them, but the humans were moving too fast and too close to the planet for the big guns to target. Effectively, target the orbital platforms, Hyanwu ordered his weapons officer. The ones bombarding the surface, the Retribution's main cannon fired, and a Dominion bombardment platform exploded in a ball of fire. The chain reaction took out 2 more platforms as their ammunition stores detonated. Suddenly, the rain of death falling on the Volani cities stopped. On the surface of Kelrose, Colonel Dongman and his Marines were already in action. They had launched from the assault carriers while the space battle raged overhead, dropping in armored pods that punched through the atmosphere like meteors. The landing was rough, but every Marine made it to the ground alive. The first thing Dongman saw when he stepped out of his drop pod was a Dominion processing center. It was exactly what Dr. Sung-Ho had described, but seeing it in person made his blood run cold. Volani prisoners were being dissolved in acid baths while other prisoners were forced to watch. The screams were not sounds, but harmonic frequencies that cut through the air like broken glass. First platoon, with me, Dongman growled into his communicator. Second and third platoons surround the facility. Nobody gets out. The Dominion guards had never faced human infantry before. They were used to fighting species that valued honor and fair combat. They were not prepared for humans, who fought like angry animals when they saw innocent people being tortured. Major Hyojin led the assault on the main gate. She moved like liquid death, her powered armor making her faster and stronger than any Dominion soldier. Her rifle fired rounds that could punch through tank armor, and she used it with the precision of a surgeon and the fury of a hurricane. The Dominion soldiers tried to use Volani prisoners as human shields, pointing their weapons at the crystalline beings and demanding the humans surrender. It was a tactic that had worked against other species many times before. Hyojin's response was to put a rifle round through the guard's head from 200 meters away. "We do not negotiate with terrorists," she said calmly as she moved to the next target. The battle on the surface was swift and brutal. The Dominion ground forces were professional soldiers, but they had been fighting a genocide campaign against helpless civilians for months. They were not ready for an enemy that fought back with the same level of violence they had been using in space. The battle was turning into something the galaxy had never seen before. The human ships moved in patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully coordinated. They struck fast and hard, then disappeared before the Dominion could respond effectively. Chief Engineer Taeho was on the bridge of the heavy cruiser Busan when Admiral So-young gave the order he had been waiting for. "All ships with planet crackers, you are authorized to fire at will." The planet crackers were weapons that the Galactic Union had banned because they were too dangerous to exist. They used controlled gravity fields to compress matter until it collapsed into microscopic black holes. The energy release could destroy entire moons. Taeho smiled grimly as he armed the weapon. "Target the Dominion command ship. Maximum yield." The planet cracker fired, and for a moment, space itself seemed to bend around the beam. The weapon hit the massive Dominion flagship and simply erased it from existence. The ship did not explode or burn. It just stopped being there. The energy wave from its destruction disabled half the enemy fleet and sent the other half scattering in panic. Admiral Korthok was dead before he knew what hit him. His second-in-command, General Vorthok, took control of what remained of the fleet and tried to regroup. But the humans were not giving him time to think. The human fleet pressed their attack with relentless efficiency. They had studied Dominion tactics for months during the journey to Kelrose. They knew exactly how the enemy would respond to every situation. More importantly, they knew the enemy had never faced an opponent who fought without rules. Dr. Sung-Ho was monitoring the battle from the medical ship Mercy when he detected something. That made him call Admiral So-young immediately. "Admiral, I am reading massive harmonic activity from the planet's surface. The surviving Volani are trying to sing something. I think they are trying to help us." So-young looked at the tactical display. The space battle was going well, but there were still Dominion forces on the ground. The Volani song might be their way of telling the humans where the enemy was hiding. "Can you translate it?" "Working on it now," Sung-Ho replied. "Admiral, They are giving us target coordinates. They are directing our bombardment to hit Dominion positions while avoiding their own people. The partnership between the humans and Volani turned the tide of the ground battle. The crystal beings used their harmonic abilities to guide human artillery strikes with perfect precision. Dominion bunkers that had seemed impregnable were destroyed by orbital bombardment directed by the very people they had been trying to exterminate. Colonel Dongman stood in the ruins of the largest processing center on Kelrose, watching his medics treat the rescued Volani prisoners. Many were badly injured, their crystal bodies cracked and scarred by torture. But they were alive, and their harmonic songs were growing stronger as more of their people were freed. A young Volani approached him, moving carefully on legs that were still healing from acid burns. Through the translator, her words came out as pure gratitude mixed with wonder. "Why did you come?" she asked. "We are not your people. We have nothing to give you. Why did you cross the galaxy to save us?" Dongman looked down at her. This small creature who had endured unimaginable pain but still had the strength to ask questions. He thought about his own daughter back on Earth and about all the children who had died because no one came to help them. Because someone had to, he said, simply because it was right and because no one should have to die alone. The space battle ended 3 hours later when the last Dominion ship either surrendered or was destroyed. General Vorthok himself was captured when his command ship was disabled by a precisely placed missile. The Dominion fleet that had terrorized this corner of the galaxy for months was now space debris and prisoners. Admiral Young stood on the observation deck of the Indomitable, looking down at the planet Kel. The crystal cities were badly damaged, but they were still there. And from the surface, she could hear the faint sound of Volani songs beginning to rise again. "Admiral," her communication officer reported, "we are receiving a message from Dominion High Command. They are requesting immediate ceasefire and negotiations." So Young smiled coldly. "Tell them we will consider negotiations after they withdraw all forces from Volani space and turn over everyone responsible for the genocide. Until then, we consider ourselves at war with the entire Dominion collective." The message went out across the galaxy within hours. Humanity had traveled across half the known universe to fight a war for strangers. They had defeated the most powerful military force in their region of space, and they had done it all because it was the right thing to do. The galaxy was beginning to understand that the Deathworlders were not the monsters they had feared. They were something far more dangerous. They were the monsters that other monsters should fear. 3 days after the Battle of Kelrose, Elder Vises stood in the ruins of the Great Crystal Palace and watched human engineers working to rebuild his world. The sight filled him with wonder and confusion in equal measure. These strange beings had crossed impossible distances to save his people, and now they were staying to help repair the damage. The human medics moved carefully among the wounded Volani, their heavy boots making soft sounds on the crystal floors. Dr. Sung-Ho had worked without sleep for 72 hours, learning how to treat crystalline physiology and training his staff to help the survivors. Many Volani had injuries that would have been fatal without immediate care. Dr. Elder Vises said through the harmonic translator, "Why do your people continue to help us? The battle is won. Your mission is complete." Dr. Sung-Ho looked up from the young Volani he was treating, a child whose crystal structure had been cracked by Dominion torture. The human's eyes were red with exhaustion, but his hands remained steady as he worked. Because winning the battle was just the beginning. Sung-Ho replied gently, "Saving your people means making sure they can rebuild their lives. That takes more than just defeating your enemies." Across the galaxy, the news of the Battle of Kelrose spread like wildfire. The Galactic Union was in emergency session, trying to understand how a species they had dismissed as primitive warriors had defeated the mighty Dominion collective. The representatives who had refused to help the Volani were now demanding explanations from the human ambassador. Ambassador Jin Young sat calmly at the speaker's podium, facing hundreds of alien representatives who were all talking at once. Some were angry that humans had acted without permission. Others were terrified of what this meant for the balance of power in the galaxy. A few were quietly impressed by what humanity had accomplished. The floor recognizes the representative from the Zephyrian Republic. The session moderator announced. The Zephyrian delegate stood up, his forearms gesturing dramatically. The humans have violated every principle of galactic law. They launched an unprovoked attack on Dominion forces without consulting this body. They used weapons banned by different treaties. They have destabilized an entire sector of space. Jin Young listened patiently until the alien finished speaking, then stood up slowly. The chamber fell silent, waiting to hear how humanity would defend its actions. Honorable delegates, Jin Young began, his voice carrying across the vast hall. 3 weeks ago, you all heard the same distress call that we did. You heard a peaceful species crying out for help as they were being systematically murdered, and you did nothing. The chamber erupted in angry voices, but Jin Young continued speaking over them. You cited distance. You cited politics. You cited the complexity of galactic law. You found 100 reasons why it was not your problem. But we found only one reason that mattered. They were dying, and we could save them. On Kelrose, the reconstruction continued. Human engineers worked alongside Volani artisans to rebuild the crystal cities. The aliens had technology that could regrow crystal structures, but they needed materials and power sources that the Dominion had destroyed. The humans provided both, along with something more valuable. Hope. Colonel Dongman walked through the refugee camps that had been set up outside the damaged cities. His Marines were helping distribute supplies and maintain security, but their main job was simply being present. The Volani needed to see that someone was still protecting them. A group of young Volani approached him, their crystal bodies glowing with the soft light that indicated curiosity and excitement. Through the translator, their questions came in a rush of harmonic sound. Are you really from the Death World? Is it true that your planet tries to kill you? How did you learn to fly between the stars? Will you teach us to fight like you do? Smiled and sat down on a piece of rubble so he would be closer to their height. Yes, Earth is dangerous, but that is not what makes us strong. We are strong because we learned to work together. We learned to protect each other. And we learned that the most important battles are the ones we fight for other people. The young Volani listened with fascination as he told them stories of Earth, not the violent stories they expected, but tales of humans helping each other during disasters, sacrificing for strangers, and choosing to do right even when it was difficult. Meanwhile, the political aftershocks of the battle continued to spread. The Dominion Collective had called for an emergency meeting with their military commanders. Fleet Admiral Zorthok, one of their most experienced officers, stood before the ruling council and delivered a report that shook the foundations of their empire. The humans do not fight like any species we have encountered, he reported. They use tactics that ignore all accepted rules of warfare. They show no mercy to enemies who harm civilians. And most disturbing of all, they seem to grow stronger when they are fighting for others instead of themselves. The Dominion High Counselor, an ancient being who had ruled for over 1,000 years, leaned forward in his throne. Are you telling us that these primitives are a threat to our empire? Zorthok looked around at the other council members, all of them expecting him to say that the human victory was just luck or a fluke. That would not happen again. Instead, he told them the truth. Counselor, the humans destroyed our most powerful fleet in less than 4 hours. They rescued every surviving Volani and established a permanent garrison to protect them. They have declared war on our entire civilization and shown that they have the military capability to make that threat real. Yes, they are a threat. They may be the greatest threat we have ever faced. Back on Kelrose, Admiral So Young received a message that would change everything. It was not from Earth or the Galactic Union. It was from a species called the Morthani, inhabitants of a world on the edge of Dominion space. The message was simple. We have heard what you did for the Volani. Our world is next. The Dominion fleet is coming. Please help us. Soyoung called an emergency meeting of her senior officers. They gathered in the conference room of the Indomitable, looking tired but determined. The Battle of Kelrose had cost them 60 ships and 8,000 casualties, but they had saved an entire species from extinction. We have another distress call. So Young announced the Morthani are requesting assistance against an incoming Dominion attack. General Jaehyun studied the tactical displays showing the location of the Morthani homeworld. Admiral, we are already spread thin, protecting Kelros. If we divide our forces further, we risk losing everything we have gained here. Captain Hyanwu spoke up from his position at the table. So we get reinforcements. We call for volunteers from across human space. After what happened here, every ship captain in the fleet will want to be part of this. Major Hyojin nodded. In agreement, the men are already asking when we move out. They know this is bigger than just one battle. We started something here that we need to finish. So Young looked around at her officers, seeing the same determination in their eyes that had brought them across the galaxy. They were tired, outnumbered, and facing an enemy with vast resources, but they were also human, and that meant they would never stop fighting for those who could not fight for themselves. Send a message to Earth, she decided. Tell them we need more ships, more supplies, and more volunteers. Tell them the Mercy Fleet is expanding operations. The message reached Earth 6 days later, and the response was immediate. Every shipyard in human space began working around the clock to build new vessels. Every military academy graduated its classes early to provide crews. Every colony world sent its best volunteers to join the fight. 3 months later, Lieutenant Minha stood on the bridge of the Retribution as they dropped out of hyperspace near the Morthani homeworld. Behind them came not 300 ships, but over 1,000. The Mercy Fleet had become an armada, the Dominion forces waiting for them. Took one look at the human fleet and immediately called for reinforcements. They had learned to fear the sound of human voices on their communication channels. They had learned to run when they saw the distinctive blue glow of human hyperspace drives. But most importantly, they had learned that in a galaxy full of species, that would look the other way when innocence suffered. There was one group that would always answer the call for help. Elder Desus stood in his rebuilt palace and listened to the harmonic songs of his people. They were different now. These songs, they carried notes of gratitude and hope that had not existed before the humans came. His people had learned that they were not alone in the universe. And across the galaxy, other species were learning the same lesson. When the monsters came to destroy the innocent, the Deathworlders would be there to stop them, because that was what humans did. They crossed impossible distances to keep impossible promises. They fought unwinnable wars for people they had never met, and they never ever abandoned those who needed their protection. The galaxy would never be the same.